I was with a friend of mine who had 2 tickets and who invite me to join. So I came by and we've been caught in something bigger than us.
Attends, un instant. Il y a une bombe, elle a explosé. Wow, on dirait du Stade de France. Oh là 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 là. Il a pleuré, wesh. Mais je crois qu'il est mort.
Excusez-moi, qu'est-ce qui s'est passé? Qu'est-ce qui s'est passé?
Je sais pas, il y a des gens qui étaient dans le restaurant, des gens dans la rue, il y a quelqu'un qui est arrivé avec une mitraillette et qui a commencé à tirer sur tout le monde.
Merde.
The band was playing for like 40 minutes. When it started like crackers. We thought it was part of the show. And the crew began to go berserk, so we thought, no, that's not normal, we have to go. We end up hiding in between the ceiling and the roof. We've been stuck there till the end.
Qu'est-ce qui se passe?
We've been able to text our families and friends. We told our family everything was fine, we were loving them, and everything was in the hand of God. We've been freed by the police, the SWAT team, who broke through the roof. But before we entered the hall again, they stopped us in the middle of the stairs and told us, all right, this is quite exceptional, this is very sensitive. If you don't want to see, don't see. We invite you to look down. I looked up in the pit and I saw a huge pile of bodies. That was horrible. That was total mayhem.
Friday, November 13th, a night of horror in the city of love. A night when 128 people were murdered. A night where young Europeans turned on young Europeans. The most violent night in Paris since the Second World War. I'm Sandra Gatman, and I've come to Paris to try to find out how this attack will change France and the rest of the world. This attack was planned on Facebook, captured on mobile phones, streamed on Periscope, and memorialized on Twitter. It was a new dawn for terror, and after this night, Europe may never be the same again.
Everything took part in the same part of the town, which is the place where we live, where our friends live, where our children live, where our lovers live. And so, of course, we feel like we're directly and personally attacked, and I just don't understand why I'm not dead.
Now we're dealing with a whole generation of young jihadists.
These groups have been clever enough, just like Satan, into using our social problems to turn them against us.
I know them. I lived with them for 10 months, and therefore
it's quite easy for me to tell them I'm not afraid.
Parisians woke up on Saturday morning to a changed place. The news gripped the city. A string of coordinated attacks had hit streets and venues so familiar to so many people.
I don't recognize my neighborhood. I feel like I'm in a nightmare.
Hospitals were overwhelmed as doctors treated what they described as hundreds of war wounds. Medical staff could barely cope with the number of blood donors queuing up to help survivors cling on. Soon the death toll began to climb. Many young lives were cut short. They were students, football fans, and music lovers. Their friends, relatives, and the people of Paris came back to the Le Marais neighborhood to remember the victims and try to come to terms with what had happened.
I didn't sleep last night and I don't want to sleep because I know that when I'm going to wake up, it's going to be real.
I mean, when you're 18 and you're living that kind of thing, you know that your life is never going to be the same. The way you see life changes, and you don't have faith in humanity anymore.
What's particularly chilling about these attacks is that this isn't a government area. It wasn't embassies that were targeted. It was a Friday night, and the 11th district is a young, vibrant, and multicultural place. No one saw this coming. But there were signs that France was becoming a prime target for terrorists. 8 months ago, Paris was rocked by shootings at the satirical magazine Charlie Hebdo and a Jewish supermarket. This summer, an armed man tried to gun down passengers on a high-speed train. And police say all of those attacks were connected. The gunmen were all under 35 years of age, and all of them had grown up in Europe. In the past year alone, the number of suspected foreign fighters traveling between Europe and Syria and Iraq has doubled to around 10,000. Though, according to Europol, only 2,000 names have been confirmed. While overseas, some are trained to wage war on the continent they used to call home. I've come to the suburbs in the north of Paris to try to find out why. The French word for suburb is banlieue, but that word has taken on a pejorative meaning for French people. It's a word used to describe a crime-ridden area where concrete blocks dominate the skyline, whose occupants are the subject of anxious and angry discussions in France. In many suburbs, the unemployment rate is double that of central Paris. But young Muslims say they find getting by especially hard.
It's always difficult being part of a minority. What I would advise to every Muslim in France to do is to leave and go to a Muslim country as soon as they can. If they really truly want to practice their religion, there it's easier. Today's Muslim society is really a different society.
When you have people being cast aside from society from an early age, our schools in France and then places of work are places of massive discrimination. So at the same time, we can't have these kids believing that they belong to this country and then not be tempted when they are weak enough to be used by these terrorist groups. And unfortunately, these groups have been clever enough, just like Satan, into using our social problems to turn them against us.
The social problems of France's suburbs have been well documented. The Paris riots of 2005 were a reminder of that anger that bubbles under the surface. Many young people here see a life of crime as the only way out. But getting caught doesn't solve the problem.
Many of young people are in prisons, and in prisons they have very bad condition to be inside this prison, and there they have very bad ideas about peace, about society, about their living in France.
In the wake of the attacks, debate flared in France about whether the banlieues breed terrorists. The far-right Front National party said the attacks justified their stance against immigration. The discovery of a Syrian passport in the Bataclan music hall also fueled arguments against accepting more refugees in Europe.
Islamic fundamentalism must be destroyed. France must forbid Islamist organisations. They must close radical mosques and expel the foreigners who preach hate on our soil, as well as illegal migrants who shouldn't be here.
But this time, France's banlieues weren't entirely to blame. Daesh terrorists did hide in the suburb of Boligny while preparing their explosives, but it soon emerged that these attacks were orchestrated elsewhere. Belgium, a small European country of 11 million that has the highest rate per capita of fighters in Syria and Iraq. Much like in France, Belgium's suburbs have long been a focus for police looking for local links with terrorist groups overseas. But one area has been a particular trouble spot. Of the 400 or so Belgians who've left to fight for Daesh, it's believed more than 30 had at one point lived here in Molenbeek. 3 of the Paris attackers were among them.
They just watch the news. They see their brothers, Muslims, being massacred on a daily basis and at a huge scale in Syria, and they truly believe that they can go there and help. The problem is that eventually IS is a scam.
Brussels is no longer taking any risks. The touristic city has been under security lockdown for weeks as police continue their full-scale manhunt for Saleh Abdeslam. With police on the tail of other terror suspects, Belgium has issued its highest level of alert, fearing other attacks are still being planned. Belgium says its crackdown will go on as long as is necessary, but many Belgians are asking, is it already too late?
Now we're dealing with a whole generation of young jihadists. We do not have efficient short-term solutions that will allow to eradicate the threat of terrorism for Brussels and for Belgium.
Abdelhamid Aboud grew up in Molenbeek, but the 28-year-old met his end on November 19th. In a dawn raid on a cramped apartment in the Parisian suburb of Saint-Denis. For a few days, he was Europe's most wanted man, named as the ringleader of the Paris attacks. His smiling face was on the front pages of every newspaper in every country in the world. But to readers of Dabik, the magazine published by Daesh's public relations wing, he was already familiar. Months earlier, he'd starred in a 4-page interview boasting of his plans to attack Europe.
Tell us about your journey to Al-Sham.
Allah blinded their vision, and I was able to leave despite being chased by so many intelligence agencies. We should not fear the bloated image of the Crusader intelligence. My name and picture were all over the news, yet I was able to stay in their homeland, plan operations against them, and leave safely when doing so became necessary.
Daesh's media arm is increasingly sophisticated. It's produced glossy recruitment videos, a PR campaign for its healthcare system modeled on Britain's National Health Service. They even have a music video. French journalist Nicolas Hénon was kidnapped and held by Daesh for 10 months. He says the reality of Daesh doesn't match their advertising, and many fighters who are drawn to their cause return to Europe disillusioned.
I have an advantage, and you, or on most of your viewers, is that you know Daesh only from the propaganda video on which they portray themselves as kind of super terror, absolute evil organization, which they are not. I know them. I lived with them for 10 months, and therefore it's quite easy for me to tell them I'm not afraid. I don't purchase your legend anymore.
But with every attack comes the sobering reminder that Daesh is real, active, and dangerous. For the French president, enough was enough.
C'est un acte de guerre qui a été commis par
It's an act of war committed by a terrorist army, Daesh, an Islamist army, against France, against the values we uphold throughout the world, against who we are, a free country.
un pays libre.
François Hollande is widely considered an unpopular president. He's failed to turn the economy around, and his secret affair with an actress became a public scandal. But over the years, he has tried to shed his unconfrontational image. France was the first country to send troops into Central Africa, and after 2 terror attacks on French soil in less than a year, President Hollande has galvanized the West to finally defeat Daesh.
World leaders were quick to promise a unified response to the Paris attacks. Airstrikes against Daesh have intensified, and there have been some signs of closer cooperation. But what impact will extra bombing raids have? And can the international community, until now divided, really unite to stop extremists? Earlier this year, Daesh extended its reach when it took control of Palmyra and Ramadi, but it's also suffered defeats. It lost Kobani last year, Tikrit this spring, most of the Baiji refinery area this autumn, and most recently, Sinjar. The Iraqi armies also made gains in Ramadi. Since the Paris attacks, there's been a dramatic increase of bombing raids against Daesh. France has targeted the group's stronghold of Raqqa, and Russia too has increased strikes after blaming the group for shooting down a Russian airliner over Egypt. But despite calls for unity, there are wider strategic issues. Russia and Iran back Syrian President Assad, who the West want removed. But all members of the UN Security Council have agreed that Daesh must be defeated.
This resolution calls on all member states to take all necessary measures against Daesh.
In turn, Daesh has vowed to fight back and threatened more attacks on France. And that's causing concern on the streets of Paris.
For many young Parisians, France's social policies, even the war in Syria, seem like distant concepts. For them, these attacks mean thinking twice about walking down the street, meeting friends in cafes, or even going to a concert.
Speaking for the first time about the attacks in an interview with Vice News, the band members of Eagles of Death Metal pledged to finish the show they started in Paris in the Bataclan.
I want to come back. I want to be the first band to play in the Bataclan when it opens back up.
Why?
I want to, because I was there when it went silent for a minute. Mm-hmm. Our friends went there to see rock and roll and died. Mm-hmm. I'm going to go back there and live.
The city has been on edge since the attacks. France is under a state of emergency for 3 months, and there's a heavy police presence at Paris's tourist sites. At the Place de la République, which has become a place for Parisians to grieve together, even the sound of firecrackers can cause mass panic.
None of us quite know what's going on. We're hearing choppers above. Our colleagues are out on the streets. They're hiding in restaurants. There are some people walking, but at a very fast pace, and I don't think anyone feels safe at all right now.
But as the days went on, a new sense of determination was felt on these streets. An online campaign called for residents to get back outside. to get back to the cafes and live their lives as before. The city's motto is "She is tossed by the waves but does not sink." Now more than ever, Paris is determined not to.
Now we have to live with this terrorist threat like we live with this cancer threat or the road trafficking accidents or any other type of insecurity. And we have to get used to it, and I think that's the strength of the people here, to admit that there is a threat. We will continue to fight it, and we have to continue to feel secured in our way of life.
I had been pulsing in dreams. If these may not be wishes, I think was popular on your skin.
The Bataclan Music Hall, where more than 89 people were gunned down, is one of Frank's favorite venues. But he says fear won't stop him or his friends from playing.
I feel targeted myself directly. And it's terrible to have no idea how to answer, personally, what can you do? Of course we're gonna play. Keep on going to the same places and play. Just you have to continue living, but with the idea that it's gonna happen again.
France's state of emergency will no doubt disrupt the sense of fun the city is known for. But young people are determined not to let it shape them. I've come to visit an interfaith group that's busier than ever. Soon after the attacks, they created a makeshift office to flood social media with positive messages. These young Christians, Jews, and Muslims of Paris want the same thing: to prevent the next generation from growing apart.
The idea is to go and know about the conviction and know about the religion of the other, so we can create a link, a bond between these two people, and that's what we call the active coexistence, and that is what is missing in France. Definitely.
I came to Paris to try to find out whether this tragedy would be the one to change France and the world forever. In a way, it already has. There's talk of a new diplomatic approach to solving the crisis in Syria, talk of better intelligence sharing and police cooperation. But security forces are overwhelmed by the new face of globalized terror. And there is no quick fix for the deep-rooted social problems that drive young people to terrorism in France's banlieue and elsewhere. The horror that struck Paris just a day after bombings in Beirut and amid daily violence in Syria paint a worrying future of a world still battling terrorism. Now, things here in France will change, and there will be wider geopolitical consequences as politicians formulate their response. But who better to inspire a sense of defiance than those who lost their loved ones, the people whose scars will be the deepest.
Friday night you took away the life of an exceptional human being, the love of my life, the mother of my son, but you will never have my hatred. I do not know who you are, and I do not wish to. You are dead souls. If this God from whom you killed so blindly has made us in his image, every bullet in the body of my wife will have been a wound in his heart. I'm of course devastated by heartbreak. I'll cede you that little victory, but it will be short-lived. I know that you will be with us every day, and that we will meet again in a paradise of free soul, to which you will never have access.
To the 80 people who were murdered inside that venue, who weren't as lucky, who didn't get to wake up today, and to all the pain that their friends and families are going through, I'm so sorry. There's nothing that will fix the pain. I feel privileged to be there for their last breaths, and truly believing that I would join them. I promise that their last thoughts were not on the animals who caused all this. It was thinking of the people they loved.
To everyone who, in the face of unrelenting evil, went toe-to-toe using courage, compassion, and love as their weapons, you all are my heroes. The outreach and support back home is appreciated more than you'll ever know. I will never forget it. I am forever changed, but hold fast to the love around us. I'm counting down the days until I get to finish that concert. Peace and love.